Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Nick bought his dream home outside a nosy HOA, he expected peace, sawdust, and solitude. What he got instead was a clipboard-wielding tyrant named Karen, fake laws, midnight photos, and a war over a red hammock. Welcome to the battle for one man's yard and his freedom to be left alone. When I first saw the house, I knew I'd found something rare. A craftsman-style home with a big wraparound porch nestled right on the edge of the Brookview Trails community, but not part of it. That was important. My realtor was very specific. This parcel is private. It was never incorporated into the HOA when Brookview Trails was developed. That was music to my ears. I run a woodworking business, build eco-homes, and enjoy being left the hell alone. The last thing I needed was a bunch of retirees with clipboards telling me what color my mulch should be. I closed on the property 2 months ago, spent the first couple weeks setting up my workshop in the detached garage, running new lines for the CNC machine, and finally having enough space to breathe. The house was a little rough around the edges, but nothing a man with a set of tools and time couldn't fix. There was even a grove of fir trees at the back, and a side yard big enough for a future greenhouse if I ever got the itch. The first sign of trouble came in a cheery white envelope slipped under my gate, sealed with an embossed gold stamp that read, Brookview Trails HOA, Welcoming Committee. Cute. Inside was a pamphlet filled with glossy photos of smiling couples and cookie-cutter homes, and a note from Karen Merritt, president. She congratulated me on my arrival into our cherished community and invited me to an orientation next Sunday. The wording was polished, but the implication was clear. Time to fall in line. I didn't respond. Instead, I went into my filing cabinet, pulled out the parcel map, the exclusionary clause, and the land survey confirming I was outside HOA jurisdiction. Just to be safe, I made 10 copies. I had a feeling I'd need them. The following week, a second letter came. This one was more formal, printed on HOA letterhead. It said I could opt into voluntary compliance with community standards, and that failure to do so might create tension with fellow residents who value neighborhood cohesion. There was also a list of suggested improvements, including painting my front porch a more community-appropriate beige and removing the cedar log pile by my fence, which they called excess natural debris. Natural debris, my ass. Those were hand-split logs. I drafted a simple letter back. Dear Brookview Trails HOA, I am not a member of your association, nor is my property legally bound by your CC&Rs. Please do not contact me again. I attached a copy of my deed, survey, and the county's parcel map with my lot clearly outlined in yellow. Certified mail. Signature required. 3 days later, while I was installing new shelving in the shop, my Ring camera buzzed. I checked my phone and saw a woman in her 60s standing just outside my front gate, holding a binder and a large tote bag. Blonde helmet hair, gold-framed sunglasses, and the posture of someone who had never backed down from a homeowner form in her life. I knew immediately this had to be Karen. She didn't ring the bell. She banged on the metal of the gate with the side of her clipboard, then waited, arms crossed. I stepped out onto the porch. Good morning, I said. Mr. Grayson, she called, squinting through the bars. Karen Merritt, president of the Brookview Trails Homeowners Association. We need to talk. I walked down the steps but didn't unlock the gate. We already did. Through letters, I said calmly. I'm not in your HOA. Karen gave a patient, patronizing smile, the kind kindergarten teachers use when toddlers insist dinosaurs are still alive. There's been some confusion. Your lot borders Brookview Trails and therefore falls within the visual purview of the association. That gives us certain oversight responsibilities. Visual purview, I repeated. That's a new one. It means the community has a vested interest in the aesthetics and safety of adjacent properties. We've had some concerns raised about your woodpile, your use of industrial equipment in a residential setting, and your hammock. My hammock. Bright red. Rather garish, don't you think? I think it holds up just fine, I said. Like I told you in my letter, this is private property. No HOA jurisdiction, no dues, no meetings, no oversight. Karen pursed her lips. There's no need to be combative. If you'd simply attend our community welcome event this weekend, we could clarify a lot of this. I won't be attending. Then I'll need to schedule a preliminary inspection of your lot to document any variances. You're not setting foot on my property, I said. There is no inspection. There are no variances. You have no authority here. She stiffened. You're making this unnecessarily difficult. Our bylaws are clear, and your bylaws don't apply to me, I snapped, finally letting the irritation leak out. Take your binder and your tote bag and walk back the way you came. Karen didn't move. She just stared at me, like I was some wayward pet she intended to train. I see, she said at last. Well, if you're going to take that tone, then I suppose we'll have to escalate through formal channels. Good luck with that, I said, and turned to walk back up the steps. Behind me, I heard her mutter, "Be a shame if someone reported that firewood pile as a fire hazard." I paused, but didn't look back. The sound of her heels crunching down the gravel driveway was enough to tell me she was retreating. For now. I went back inside, pulled up a chair, and jotted down every word she'd said. Something told me this wasn't over, not by a long shot. About 4 days passed without another knock at the gate, and I started to think maybe Karen had gotten the message. I kept my head down, well, as much as a man can when he's hauling reclaimed beams across his driveway and running a table saw at 10 in the morning. I had 2 contracts lined up, both for high-end pergolas made from salvaged Oregon pine, and I wasn't about to slow down because a nosy HOA president didn't like the color of my hammock. Then came the envelope. It wasn't slipped under the gate this time. It arrived by certified mail, signed for by my neighbor, and passed to me with a half-apologetic shrug. Official Brookview Trails letterhead. Embossed seal. Heavy paper that screamed, "We spent HOA dues on stationery." Inside was a document titled Notice of Conditional Oversight, which sounded like something invented by a management seminar reject. It stated that unregulated properties adjacent to the Brookview Trails community pose potential safety, aesthetic, and insurance risks, and that the HOA president may initiate emergency evaluations of such properties under the Community Safety Expansion Clause, which, as far as I could tell, was total fiction. They even included a timeline for voluntary inspection, suggesting I should select a preferred date for Karen to stroll around my land and assess compliance with community visual standards. At the bottom was a highlighted warning. Failure to comply may trigger corrective action as per Section 4C of the Visual Harmony Charter. I laughed so hard I spilled my coffee. That evening, I sent another certified response, short and blunt. I am not under the jurisdiction of the Brookview Trails HOA. Your documents have no legal standing. Any unauthorized entry onto my property will be treated as trespassing and reported to law enforcement. I enclosed copies of the parcel map again, just to drive the point home. Then I called my attorney, Scott Wexler. We'd worked together before, mostly on zoning permits and contract disputes, but I figured it was time to loop him in before this circus got any worse. After I read him the letter, he paused, then said, "That clause they quoted doesn't exist. It's not in any Oregon HOA framework I've seen, so it's just noise. Mostly, but if they try anything physical, entry, threats, citations, we hit back. Hard." I installed 2 more surveillance cameras the next day, one aimed directly at the side gate, another covering the rear fence line. I also swapped out the private property sign for one that read, "Private land not subject to HO. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Subtlety wasn't working. Time to be loud. By the weekend, things went quiet again. No new letters, no clipboard warriors pacing outside my gate. I even let myself relax a little, played fetch with my dog Daisy, and cleaned out the cedar pile while blasting Zeppelin just a little louder than usual. But Sunday morning, I opened my mailbox and found something new. A thick envelope, this time unsigned with no return address. Inside was a stack of glossy printouts labeled Community Aesthetic Violations, Grayson Residence. It included zoomed-in photos of my log stack, a corner of exposed plywood near the workshop, and, of course, the hammock. Each photo had a handwritten caption underneath in red ink. Non-conforming, potential hazard, eyesore. At the bottom was a note. This kind of visual pollution impacts all residents. Your cooperation is not optional. Now, I'm not a man who spooks easy, but the fact that someone, presumably Karen, had been snooping around my fence line, zooming in with a camera or phone, and then leaving messages in my mailbox, that crossed a line. I contacted Scott again and emailed him copies. His reply came within the hour. "We escalate. Keep all physical correspondence. I'll draft a cease and desist." I didn't sleep well that night. Not because I was scared, but because my brain wouldn't stop running through worst-case scenarios. I dealt with bureaucracy before, but this wasn't a system. It was a petty tyrant in a pantsuit, making up rules and trying to enforce them by sheer willpower. And for all her fake letters and nonsense charters, I had a feeling Karen Merritt was just getting started. It was supposed to be a quiet Sunday. I'd invited a few friends and family over for a backyard cookout. Nothing fancy, just ribs on the grill, cold beer, and the sort of easy laughter you only get when everyone forgets their phones exist. My brother Luke had driven in with his wife and their 2 kids, and my buddy Jordan brought his massive Bluetooth speaker that looked like a weaponized lunchbox. The sun was out, the smell of mesquite was in the air, and for a few hours I let myself believe the nonsense with Karen was behind me. Then Daisy barked. She's a sweet dog, but she doesn't bark unless someone's somewhere they shouldn't be. I turned my head just in time to see her sprinting toward the side yard, ears up, tail stiff. A second later, I heard the clatter, metal against metal, something shifting. Then a voice. "Easy, I'm just checking something." I rounded the corner of the house and froze. There, half hanging over my side fence, was Karen Merritt in a white visor and sneakers, one leg already over the top rail, like some HOA-themed gym teacher breaking into a playground. In her hands was the same damned leather binder I'd seen at the gate, and a disposable camera dangling from her wrist like she was about to take yearbook photos. "What the hell are you doing?" I snapped, stomping toward her. She froze mid-straddle, looking completely unbothered, conducting a safety inspection. "There have been visual irregularities reported near the boundary line. You're climbing over my fence." "This is technically an access point," she said, as if that explained anything. "And given that your property shares a visibility corridor with the community." "Get down. I need to document the structure adjacent to your patio. It appears to lack HOA compliant supports." "You mean the hammock stand?" "I mean the illegal covered structure that could pose wind-borne hazards." At that point, she was standing fully in my yard. The rest of the guests started drifting over. My brother looked like he was about to explode. My sister-in-law covered the kids' ears when I called Karen exactly what she was, a delusional lunatic with a clipboard and no legal standing. Karen, of course, remained calm, flipping open her binder and clicking her pen like she was grading a final exam. "Let's keep this civil," she said. "You've already been notified of your compliance opportunities. Continued resistance will only escalate the process." "That's it," I said. "I'm calling the cops." "Oh, don't bother," she replied cheerfully. "I already called them." I blinked. "You what?" "I reported a potential code violation and a safety obstruction. If you had nothing to hide, you wouldn't be so defensive." "You're trespassing." "I am executing a community-mandated visual assessment. As president of the Brookview Trails HOA, I am empowered to act in the interest of—" "You're empowered to take your smug ass off my lawn before I physically remove you." Karen took a step back, apparently deciding that proximity to my barbecue guests was no longer optimal. She fished a small digital camera out of her tote and started taking rapid-fire shots of my patio, the grill, my garage workshop. "Smile," she said. "Lady, you're out of your goddamn mind." "Language," she chided, like I was a rowdy student disrupting homeroom. I called the non-emergency number and told the dispatcher I had a trespasser on my property who was also impersonating authority. She told me a unit was en route. I didn't even hang up before Karen waved her camera like a trophy and said, "Good. I'll need officers present to confirm non-compliance. They'll see for themselves that this property is not up to visual standards." At that point, I wasn't sure if I wanted the cops to show up faster to arrest her or just to witness how completely unhinged she'd become. She backed off toward the gate but didn't leave. She stood just inside the fence line, still clicking photos, ignoring my guests, ignoring the stares, the whispers, the camera phones coming out. My neighbor across the street, George, leaned over the railing and yelled, "Karen, what the hell are you doing in his yard?" "Doing my job," she called back without missing a beat. I glanced at the camera feed on my phone, clear as day, full HD footage of her clambering over the fence like a raccoon in church clothes. The only thing louder than my anger was the tension rising in the yard. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was escalation. This was bold. And if the cops didn't take this seriously, I was damn well ready to make sure someone else did. The squad car rolled up faster than I expected, barely 10 minutes after I got off the phone with dispatch. 2 Lane County Sheriff's deputies stepped out, One older guy with a beer gut and mirrored sunglasses, the other a younger woman who looked like she could snap a clipboard in half with one hand. Karen perked up like a teacher whose principal had finally arrived to scold the class. "There they are," she called, marching halfway down my driveway to meet them, binder in hand. "Officers, thank you for coming. We're dealing with a high-risk visual non-compliance situation. I've documented several violations, and I believe this individual is harboring unpermitted structures." The older deputy held up a hand. "Ma'am, we'll speak with you in a moment." Karen blinked, visibly annoyed. "I'm the one who placed the call." The younger deputy gave her a neutral nod. "Yes, ma'am, and we'll get your statement. First, we're going to speak with the property owner. That'd be me." I walked toward them with Daisy trotting at my side, the heat of the sun doing little to cool my mood. I handed over a neatly stapled packet, copies of my property deed, land survey, parcel map, and the cease and desist letter Scott had helped draft last night. The deputies skimmed through it. The younger one frowned. "You're not in the HOA." "Nope. Private parcel, no contractual relationship, no covenants, no dues." The older one looked over the top of his sunglasses. "So, what's her deal?" I gestured toward Karen, still standing near the gate like she was posing for a courtroom sketch. She climbed over my fence, uninvited, during a private event with my family and friends, claimed she had the authority to inspect my property for visual violations. Then she started taking pictures and called you, saying I was obstructing a safety inspection. She climbed over the fence in view of anyone. I pulled out my phone. I've got video. 2 angles. The younger deputy took the phone, watched the footage silently. About 15 seconds in, her lip twitched. By the time Karen was swinging her leg over the railing and declaring her sacred duty to enforce visual harmony, the deputy actually laughed out loud. "Jesus Christ," she muttered, handing the phone to her partner. The older one didn't laugh, but he did shake his head like he'd seen too much of this kind of nonsense over the years. He turned to Karen. "Ma'am," he called, "can you come over here, please?" Karen strode forward like she was about to receive a medal. "Yes, officers. I assume you've seen the infractions. The hammock, the unpermitted overhang, the industrial machinery in a residential zone." He cut her off. "Ma'am, we've reviewed documentation from the property owner. His land is outside the jurisdiction of Brookview Trails HOA. You have no authority to enter or inspect this property, and you certainly don't have the right to climb over a fence and photograph his home." Karen blinked. "But the safety clause—" "There is no such clause. The Visual Harmony Charter allows—" "That is not a legally enforceable document, and frankly, it sounds made up." Karen's face began to change. The color drained, the veneer cracked. Then, "What about the community code? Surely I have a civic responsibility." "Ma'am," the younger deputy cut in, "you entered private property without permission. You called in a false report of code violations that don't exist to an address outside your purview. That's trespassing and misuse of emergency services. You can't be serious. You laid hands on the fence and crossed onto land you have no authority over. That's not just a misunderstanding. That's criminal trespass." Karen's voice sharpened. "You don't understand. If people start ignoring HOA rules, the entire community falls into chaos. He has red patio furniture. Red." The older deputy looked at me, then at his partner. Then flatly, "Ma'am, turn around. Hands behind your back." "What?" "You're being detained for trespassing and misuse of 911. You can't do this. I am the community. I am order." She flailed when the cuffs clicked, screamed when she was told she was going to be taken in for processing, tried to twist away, swung her binder at the male deputy, who caught it midair like he'd done this 1,000 times before. They walked her to the squad car while she shrieked about legal appeals, civil rights, and the visual integrity of American neighborhoods. I stood there, silent, as my guests looked on, stunned. One of the kids whispered, "Is she going to jail?" My brother muttered, "God, I hope so." After the car pulled away, the younger deputy handed me a small clipboard. "You'll be contacted by the DA's office. You might be asked to testify. But for now, you're good." "Thanks," I said, for not laughing in her face. "Oh, we waited until we got back in the car." She grinned. She turned, paused, then added, "Red patio furniture, huh? That's bold." The neighborhood was quieter the next day, not in the peaceful birds chirping kind of way, more like the silence you get after a wreck on the freeway. Everyone slows down, peeks through the windows, and pretends they're not watching. Karen's arrest had set off a shockwave. Word spread fast, as it tends to in communities obsessed with mulch conformity and mailbox height. By Monday morning, I'd had 3 neighbors walk by extra slowly, 2 pretend they were just out for a jog but stared the whole time, and 1 guy who actually stopped to say, "Hey, you're the red hammock guy, right?" I didn't know whether to laugh or punch a tree. The police report made its way to my inbox that evening. Clear and direct. Trespassing, unauthorized entry, false report of an emergency, attempted battery on a law enforcement officer. That last one, the binder swing, elevated it beyond HOA drama into real criminal territory. Scott, my attorney, was already 2 steps ahead. He'd drafted a formal complaint to the county court and was preparing to file a civil suit for trespassing and harassment. When I brought him the printed letters Karen had sent, including the community safety expansion nonsense, he raised his eyebrows. She made this up. Whole cloth, cited fake charters, invented clauses. She's been mailing this crap to me like it's gospel. He nodded slowly. That's fraud, Nick. If she sent similar letters to anyone else outside the HOA, we could be looking at a coordinated intimidation scheme. That got my attention. We spent the next 2 days going through everything. Emails, mailbox drops, even the unsigned envelope full of visual violations photos. I pulled up my ring footage again. Frame by frame, we caught Karen inching along my side fence with a camera at 10 at night. She'd been back before she ever climbed over the fence. That made it stalking. Scott whistled. We're stacking charges now. I asked if I should expect retaliation from the HOA. His face hardened. If they're smart, they'll distance themselves fast. If they're not, they'll make the same mistake Karen did and think bluster beats law. Later that night, I got a text from a woman named Melissa Druin. She lived 2 blocks over, on the opposite side of the Brookview boundary. Said she'd heard about the incident and wanted to talk. She did it to me too, the message said. Tried to scare me into signing HOA compliance papers. I still have them. We met at a coffee shop the next morning. Melissa was calm, composed, mid-40s, school administrator vibe. She pulled out a folder with 3 letters from Karen. Same seal, same threats of unregulated adjacency, and even a fake invoice for emergency visual monitoring surcharge, $185. She told me if I didn't comply, they'd report me for exterior negligence. Exterior negligence, I repeated, jaw tightening. She said my backyard had a disorderly clothesline. That did it. I gave her Scott's card and told her we were building a case. She smiled like someone who'd been holding their breath for a long time and could finally exhale. 2 more neighbors reached out that week. One had signed a voluntary compliance form under pressure. Another had paid a property harmony fee, thinking it was real. Karen hadn't just gone rogue. She'd been running a miniature extortion racket under the guise of HOA policy, and it was falling apart. Scott filed our civil suit by Friday. Criminal trespass, harassment, fraudulent representation, attempted extortion, emotional distress. He also issued a formal subpoena to the HOA board requesting all communication, expenditures, and meeting minutes related to Karen's activities for the last year. I wasn't just defending my yard anymore. We were uncovering something much bigger and uglier. And if the HOA thought staying silent would save them, they were in for a rude awakening. I figured once the lawsuit was filed, the HOA would retreat into damage control mode, circle the wagons, lie up, maybe issue a press release full of vague words like misunderstanding and unfortunate situation. Instead, I got silence. And then, deflection. A week after the papers were served, I received a thick envelope in the mail. Return address, Brookview Trails Community Board. I opened it expecting an apology or some bureaucratic drivel. What I got was an official letter stating, the Brookview Trails HOA does not take responsibility for the personal actions of individual board members acting outside their scope of authority. The recent incident involving Ms. Merritt occurred without the board's knowledge or endorsement. Any legal action should be directed at her personally. It was a classic attempt to throw Karen under the bus. The only problem? They'd forgotten the tire marks were already on their own shoes. Scott wasn't impressed. This is textbook disassociation, he said. But if they approved or funded any of what she did, even indirectly, they're in it. And I'm betting they did. So we started digging. Melissa helped. Turns out she wasn't just a school administrator. She used to work in district compliance and knew how to sniff out paperwork shenanigans like a bloodhound. We submitted a Freedom of Information Act request for any publicly accessible filings and budget allocations the HOA made over the past 12 months. Bingo! Karen had signed off on multiple external advisory expenditures totaling over $8,000. One was paid to a law firm for a property boundary consultation dated a week before her little fence-jumping stunt. Another went to a printing company, presumably the one that made her glossy visual violations handouts. But the real kicker? A payment labeled HOA Legal Fund, Visual Harmony Enforcement. $10,000 pulled from member dues, signed off by Karen and the treasurer. They were funding her crusade. I brought the docs to Scott, who nearly choked on his sandwich. "This isn't just aiding and abetting," he said. "This is organizational complicity. We're not just talking about Karen anymore. We're talking about the board." He amended the civil complaint within 24 hours, adding Brookview Trails HOA as a co-defendant and requesting an immediate subpoena of internal communications. He also scheduled a preliminary hearing to request a temporary injunction preventing the HOA from contacting or attempting to influence any non-member property owners adjacent to their community. That same night, someone tried to egg my truck. Didn't go well for them. The camera caught everything. Two teens in hoodies, clearly prompted by someone who thought analog vandalism would stop a legal freight train. Cops picked them up. They sang like parrots. Said some lady with gray hair offered them $20 each and a list of license plate numbers. Karen, out on bail, but clearly not learning. We called the DA's office and passed along the footage. The assistant DA we spoke to said they'd been meaning to call us anyway. Apparently, since her arrest, 5 more complaints had been filed by homeowners on the fringes of Brookview Trails: stalking, intimidation, fake violation notices. Even a forged compliance fine for $300. The DA was building a criminal case of their own, and they wanted to coordinate. I agreed. Hell yes, I agreed. By the end of the week, Karen was staring down a criminal prosecution, a civil lawsuit, and the slow implosion of her paper empire. And the HOA board. They had stopped pretending they didn't know her. They were suddenly very interested in amicable resolutions. A formal letter arrived offering to withdraw any claims of jurisdiction over my property, clarify boundaries, and rebuild goodwill. I handed the letter to Scott without a word. He glanced at it, then tossed it in the shredder. "Too late," he said. The courtroom smelled like lemon disinfectant and bad decisions. It was a preliminary civil hearing. Nothing flashy, no jury, just a judge, some lawyers, and a half-interested clerk tapping at a keyboard. But for me, it felt like stepping into the eye of the storm. After months of harassment, trespassing, forged documents, and HOA strong-arming, it was finally time to drag the circus into the light. Karen was there. She showed up in a pale blue blazer like she was attending a brunch fundraiser, not facing civil and criminal charges. Her attorney, a twitchy man named Blanchard with sweat stains and the confidence of a man who knew he'd drawn the short straw, kept whispering to her as if he could explain away her felony-level delusions. The HOA sent 2 representatives, a middle-aged man in a mismatched suit who introduced himself as the treasurer, and a woman from their governance committee who looked like she'd rather be undergoing a root canal. Notably absent any apology. Scott was calm, efficient. He walked the judge through the timeline: unsolicited mailings, trespass, threats, fake citations, forged documents, and misuse of HOA funds for personal vendettas. He dropped printed exhibits like playing cards, letters with invented charters, photos of Karen trespassing, video stills from the night she stalked the fence line. Then he dropped the invoice records from their own books. "That's not private action," he said, pointing to the documents. "That's funded aggression sanctioned by the board, directed by Mrs. Merritt, and paid for with community money." Blanchard tried to object, claiming the board had no idea what Karen was doing. Scott countered with meeting minutes we'd obtained just the day before, one dated 2 months prior, where Karen proudly reported progress in encouraging compliance from fringe properties and was unanimously praised for her community defense efforts. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Is this accurate?" The HOA treasurer looked like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. We may have misunderstood the scope." The governance woman cut him off. "We were misled." Scott didn't even need to respond. The room answered for him. Then came the real gut punch. Melissa Druin took the stand. She was cool, factual, devastating. Told the court about the letters Karen sent, the threats, the bogus harmony fees. She even brought in an audio recording of a conversation with Karen on her doorstep. If you don't comply, the board can escalate to lien options. You don't want to be the reason property values drop, do you? Scott played that in full. The judge asked if Melissa ever signed any HOA agreement. No, Your Honor. My house is outside the HOA boundary. I've never been a member. The judge looked straight at Karen. Is that your voice on the recording? Karen's jaw tightened. Her lawyer leaned in to whisper something. She said nothing. I'll take that as a yes, the judge muttered. By the end of the hearing, the judge granted a temporary injunction against both Karen and the HOA board. They were barred from contacting me or any adjacent property owners, directly or indirectly. He also ordered a discovery process into HOA financial activity over the past 18 months and suggested that the district attorney might be interested in the results. Karen didn't speak as she left. Not a word. But her lawyer trailed behind her, already dialing someone, his face pale. Outside the courthouse, the local news was waiting. Apparently, word had gotten out, likely through one of the other neighbors who'd also been targeted. A reporter shoved a mic at me and asked, "Is it true the HOA tried to forcibly annex your land?" I smiled. They tried. It didn't go well. Scott gave a drier answer for the camera, referencing overreach, private rights, and due process. But what mattered wasn't what we said. What mattered was the optics. Karen had marched into my yard with a binder and delusions of power. Now she was walking out of court with a gag order and the county breathing down her neck. And the HOA. Their board was next. 3 weeks after the hearing, the official subpoenas landed like bombs. The Brookview Trails HOA was forced to turn over every email, meeting record, and financial document related to their visual harmony initiatives. What started as a civil complaint cracked open into something far uglier: coordinated deception, misuse of member dues, threats against non-members, and blatant overreach dressed up as community safety. Turns out Karen had been planning her expansion campaign for over a year. She'd pitched it as territorial buffering and long-term image protection, claiming that adjacent properties posed aesthetic threats to market value. The board ate it up. In one nauseating email, a board member wrote, "If we can get just 3 or 4 of the outsiders to voluntarily comply, others will fall in line. Use pressure, use fines, be persuasive." It was racketeering with mulch and clipboards. The DA formally opened an investigation into financial improprieties and extortion under color of authority. Karen's charges were upgraded. She was now facing criminal trespass, false reporting to emergency services, attempted battery on a law enforcement officer, fraudulent representation of HOA authority, conspiracy to commit extortion, stalking, misdemeanor, and civil counts. She took a plea deal 2 days before her trial. 18 months in prison, $45,000 in restitution, 10 years of probation, and a permanent bar from serving in any HOA or civic administrative role in the state of Oregon. As for the HOA, they didn't fare much better. The state's Department of Consumer and Business Services slapped them with a $150,000 civil penalty for illegal fee collection and coercive practices. Half the board resigned under pressure, including the spineless treasurer and the woman from governance. The remaining members issued a formal apology to me, to Melissa, and to every homeowner they'd tried to bully into submission. It ran as a half-page ad in the local paper with the headline, "We were wrong." I had it framed. It hangs in my workshop now, right next to my blueprint for a cedar greenhouse I never got around to building. Oh, and the HOA. Their legal costs bankrupted their reserve fund. They had to suspend all aesthetic enforcement for the rest of the year. The irony. Their once pristine cul-de-sac now had overgrown hedges, a bright pink mailbox, and someone had hung wind chimes shaped like beer bottles. Poetic justice. As for me, I made one small addition to my property. On the fence where Karen climbed over, I built a wooden statue, carved by hand from repurposed pine. It's a hunched figure in a pantsuit, clutching a clipboard, peering over a tiny picket gate. A little plaque underneath reads, "In memory of community overreach." Neighbors stop by to laugh. Some bring coffee. A few ask for advice on how to check their own HOA's charter. And more than once, I've heard someone whisper, "You know, we should have done something like this a long time ago."